That Tuesday afternoon, I was walking back from lunch when I saw three guys in Navy suits standing around my desk. The name's Mac Henderson, by the way. Marcus, if you're being formal, but nobody's called me that since the Army. I'm 58, been in tech for 32 years, 12 of them here at Lone Star Healthcare Analytics. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. The glass walls of our Austin office reflected the harsh LED light from my monitor, still glowing with code I'd been debugging before lunch. Papers were scattered across my desk like someone had gone through them with purpose. One guy wearing latex gloves was checking my drawers. Another was photographing my screen. The third was flipping through my project notebook. The physical one I still keep because old habits die hard. I stopped in the doorway, still holding my coffee from the food truck. They didn't notice me until I cleared my throat and asked what was going on. The oldest one turned around. His face was all business but not hostile. He said they were from Internal Audit, conducting a security compliance review based on an anonymous report of potential HIPAA violations. Standard procedure, he claimed. I asked why I hadn't gotten any advance notice. In my 32 years in this business, surprise audits usually meant someone was in serious trouble. He glanced at his paperwork and said the investigation was triggered by concerns about data handling irregularities reported through proper channels. When I asked what specific irregularities, he said they'd discuss that during the formal interview process. Then he mentioned the reporting party had requested to remain anonymous, but the investigation had been authorized by Patricia Walsh, our senior director. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly who had made that anonymous report. Jordan Brooks. Jordan's desk was maybe 20 feet away, separated by those trendy glass partitions that make everything feel like a fishbowl. When I looked over, there he was by the coffee station, pretending to review something on his phone. But his eyes kept drifting toward me and my unexpected visitors. He didn't laugh or smile, just pressed his lips together slightly like someone watching a plan unfold exactly as intended. I took a slow breath, set my coffee down on the nearest desk, and told the audit team they could continue. I'd cooperate fully. After the Gulf War and 32 years in corporate America, it takes more than this to rattle me. But I knew something significant had begun. I pulled up a chair across from my desk and watched them work. The clicking of cameras, rustling of papers, everything felt deliberate and thorough. While they moved around my workspace, pieces started falling into place. Monday's team meeting, when Jordan questioned my documentation protocols in front of everyone. Last Friday afternoon, when he walked past my desk, glanced at my monitor, and made some comment about legacy security practices. That calculating look he'd been wearing lately. I remembered him mentioning in the break room that the company needed people who could adapt to evolving compliance standards better. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now I did. One of the auditors asked to access my computer files. He browsed through folders systematically, took screenshots of file structures, asked several technical questions about my current healthcare data projects. I answered everything directly, provided exactly what he needed. As he nodded his thanks, I caught Jordan's reflection in my monitor screen, walking slowly past my area again. This time, he wasn't hiding his interest. I met his gaze without saying a word. That silence seemed to make him pause. Here's the thing. I knew audit procedures inside and out. Back when I started at Lone Star 12 years ago, I was part of the compliance team when we transitioned to electronic health records. HIPAA investigations weren't uncommon in healthcare tech, but they always had specific triggers. Patient data breaches, unauthorized access attempts, whistleblower complaints with documentation. They didn't target individual employees without clear evidence, especially not someone like me who'd never had so much as a compliance warning in 12 years. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about actual security violations. Someone had orchestrated this. The lead auditor looked up from his laptop and asked if I'd ever accessed patient data outside our secure servers or shared login credentials with unauthorized personnel. I said absolutely not. Every access was logged, tracked, and stored in our central HIPAA compliance system. He nodded, scribbled detailed notes, then turned back to his team. Nobody spoke after that. I could hear the wall clock ticking, each second stretching the silence. I didn't know exactly what they were looking for, but I knew it wasn't in my computer files. It was in someone else's agenda. When they said they'd return tomorrow to conduct formal interviews and complete their review, I stood up, thanked them professionally, and stepped outside to the break area. Jordan was there, phone in hand, looking like he'd been waiting. He glanced up with this casual expression and said, Heard there's some kind of security review happening. Hope everything's okay with your projects. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, everything's fine, just standard compliance checks. Then I walked past him, leaving him standing there with his fake concern. Outside the 15th floor window, Austin traffic crawled along Mopac like usual. I leaned against the glass and stared down at the parking lot below. It wasn't fear that made my hands steady on the coffee cup. It was recognition. Someone in this company was willing to weaponize our compliance system itself. If Jordan had done that, I needed to understand exactly how deep this went. I met Jordan Brooks for the first time 3 years ago during new employee orientation. He joined Lone Star with impressive credentials, Stanford MBA, previous, experience at a major Silicon Valley health tech firm. When he walked into that conference room, Jordan carried himself with the kind of confidence that commands attention. Firm handshakes, remembered everyone's names within minutes, and when it was my turn, his eyes lingered just a bit longer than necessary. I still remember what he said that day, that he'd reviewed my work on patient behavior analytics and was impressed by the systematic approach to complex datasets. I thanked him, figured it was standard new guy politeness. Never thought that comment would be the beginning of something calculated. At first, Jordan seemed like any ambitious young professional trying to make his mark. He'd stop by my desk to ask about workflow processes, review code architecture, or discuss test results. Said learning from experienced team members was the fastest way to advance in healthcare tech. I didn't mind. Actually appreciated someone showing genuine interest in the technical work instead of just chasing the next promotion cycle. But after about 6 months, what I'd taught him started appearing in meetings, not as collaborative insights, but as if he'd developed everything himself. I realized it clearly during our Q2 review meeting. The patient data visualization dashboard my team had spent 4 months building was presented again, this time in Jordan's quarterly report with his name as primary contributor. When Patricia Walsh praised the innovation and HIPAA compliance integration, Jordan simply smiled and accepted the recognition. Never mentioned the team that actually built it or the months of late nights we'd put in. I said nothing. Didn't want to make a scene in front of senior management. In corporate America, credit fades fast when it's your word against someone with better presentation skills and an MBA. After that meeting, everything shifted. Jordan started appearing in planning sessions he wasn't originally invited to, claiming he wanted to ensure alignment on strategic healthcare initiatives. He began sending follow-up emails to Patricia, CCing me with clarifications about my project status reports, usually questioning details that were perfectly clear but forcing me to waste time responding. Each time he'd follow up with this casual laugh, saying he just wanted to help make everything bulletproof for compliance audits. Looking back, that phrase should have been a warning sign. The credit stealing escalated during a client presentation 6 months later. Jordan stood at the conference room display presenting his proposal to improve our patient data security framework for a major hospital system contract. When the client's CTO asked what research supported his recommendations, he quoted directly from a risk assessment analysis I'd written 2 weeks earlier. Word for word, just changing a few technical terms and adding some buzzwords about next-generation healthcare analytics. I looked at him, but he avoided eye contact. After the presentation, he came to my desk, put his hand on my shoulder like we were old buddies, and said my experience was truly foundational to the team's success. Couldn't tell if that was acknowledgement or mockery. Jordan had a gift for corporate speak. He knew how to make people believe he always understood what really mattered. He dropped the right industry terminology at perfect moments, referenced the latest healthcare tech trends, and when it suited him, he could appear perfectly collaborative. I heard a few colleagues mention he was being considered for a senior analyst position. I didn't care about titles or office politics, never worked for corner offices or executive recognition. I worked for the satisfaction of solving complex problems that actually helped healthcare providers serve patients better, making data systems that could save lives, not just generate reports. But for Jordan, technical excellence wasn't enough. He wanted visibility, influence, to be seen as the driving force behind every major initiative. I started noticing changes in his behavior whenever I received project assignments. Each time Patricia assigned me a high-profile client implementation, Jordan would smile, but something calculating flickered behind his eyes. He began pointing out minor issues in my work during team meetings, sometimes legitimate concerns, sometimes problems he'd actually created himself. He'd say I was technically solid but potentially too rigid for rapidly evolving healthcare compliance standards, not adaptable enough for a dynamic regulatory environment. I knew he was building toward something, but I stayed quiet. Always believed that consistent good work speaks louder than office politics. But Jordan wasn't finished. He started cultivating a closer relationship with Patricia Walsh, volunteering for her special projects and joining her for lunch meetings with other department heads. Within 2 months, Jordan was assigned to the HIPAA security upgrade project I was leading, officially as a compliance liaison, but I knew he was there to document everything I did. In our project meetings, he asked detailed questions about our data encryption protocols, access control implementations, and audit trail procedures. At first, I thought he was genuinely trying to understand our security architecture, until I realized he was creating comprehensive records, not to learn, but to build evidence. Over the following weeks, the project team atmosphere grew noticeably tense. 2 colleagues mentioned that Jordan had been asking specific questions about my approach to patient data handling, even requesting copies of my system design documentation. He claimed he needed to understand my methodology for future compliance assessments. I knew he was collecting fragments, small technical details he could later combine into something larger. Just didn't know when he'd make his move. That evening, after everyone had left the office, I walked past Jordan's workstation on my way to the parking garage. His monitor was still on, displaying a detailed spreadsheet with multiple tabs. I stepped close enough to read the main file name, Henderson Performance Documentation 2024. There wasn't much else to interpret. He was building a comprehensive case against me, entry by entry. I stood there for maybe 15 seconds, then headed for the elevator. I understood then that whatever strategy Jordan had initiated would eventually force me to respond in kind. From that day forward, I started paying closer attention to details I'd always overlooked. I realized Jordan wasn't just passively collecting information. He was actively creating situations designed to make me look incompetent or non-compliant. One morning, he sent me a patient data export with deliberately corrupted field mappings, but saved it with our standard naming convention. By the time I caught the formatting errors and corrected them, he'd already taken screenshots of the data quality issues and documented them as evidence of procedural failures. Another time, he quietly changed access permissions on our shared project repository, blocking me from uploading scheduled deliverables on time. Then he sent Patricia a concerned email asking why our milestone timeline was slipping behind schedule. Every move felt calculated, like he'd been planning the systematic campaign for months. I didn't tell anyone what I suspected. Knew if I reacted defensively, he'd use it as proof that I was becoming paranoid or couldn't handle the pressure of evolving compliance standards. So I stayed quiet, watched carefully, memorized every detail, and started preparing my own systematic response. I wasn't planning revenge, just wanted to create a way for facts to speak without me having to raise my voice or make accusations. Because in any healthcare tech company, the person who stays calm and documents everything usually outlasts the one who makes noise. One afternoon, while reviewing our quarterly team performance metrics for Patricia, an idea hit me. If Jordan could use data to build a case against me, why couldn't I use data to document something more valuable to the company? Not by tracking anyone's mistakes or creating surveillance records, but by systematically recording the positive professional behaviors that actually make healthcare teams function effectively. The kind of collaborative actions that improve patient outcomes, but usually go unrecognized in performance reviews. It seemed almost naive at first, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made from a business perspective. I called it the Team Recognition Log, built a simple tracking system using our existing internal database tools, nothing hidden or sophisticated. Each time someone went out of their way to help a colleague meet a deadline, shared critical knowledge without being asked, or demonstrated the kind of teamwork that keeps healthcare data systems running smoothly, I logged it with basic details. DR stayed late to help resolve client database connectivity issues. LP shared updated HIPAA guidelines with entire compliance team. MW acknowledged junior developer contributions during client presentation. Small professional actions that usually disappear into daily workflow but actually determine whether healthcare organizations trust us with their patient data. I had no agenda beyond maintaining perspective during a difficult workplace situation. But as the data accumulated over several weeks, I realized I was documenting something more important than individual recognition. I was creating a record of what collaborative healthcare technology work actually looks like. After about 6 weeks of consistent logging, clear patterns emerged. Certain initials appeared repeatedly, people I worked with every day who quietly kept our healthcare compliance systems running smoothly, colleagues who treated newer employees with patience, who shared institutional knowledge freely, who solved critical problems without needing public credit. Then there were others, names that never appeared in the positive interaction logs, not because they didn't work hard on their individual tasks, but because they left no trace of collaborative behavior that benefited patients or healthcare providers. Jordan Brooks was one of them. Despite being involved in multiple team projects and compliance initiatives, not a single entry in 6 weeks carried his initials. Not one act of knowledge sharing, peer support, or collaborative problem solving worth documenting. I never intended for anyone else to see the team recognition log, but another thought began forming. If someone ever questioned my commitment to healthcare compliance or team collaboration, I wouldn't need to defend myself with arguments. I'd let the systematic data speak, the kind of objective record nobody expects but everyone can verify. Jordan must have sensed I wasn't reacting to his provocations the way he'd expected. He started pushing harder during our weekly project meetings. He'd slip in questions designed to corner me about procedural decisions, casually referencing potential compliance concerns that only someone with inside access to my work would know about. He'd frame these as helpful clarifications, making sure Patricia and other team leads could hear the implications. Mac, can you walk us through why you chose that particular data encryption approach? I want to make sure we're following current healthcare security best practices. I answered every question slowly, precisely, with complete technical documentation. He'd smile and nod appreciatively, but his eyes couldn't hide the frustration that his traps weren't working. The breaking point came during a late evening in November. I'd stayed in the office to finish our monthly HIPAA compliance report, a critical deliverable that affects our certification with major hospital systems. As I took a break to grab coffee from the break room, I noticed Jordan was still there too, working alone, in the main conference room. The overhead lights were dimmed, and the glow from his laptop cast sharp shadows across his face. He was studying something intently, typing rapidly, then deleting entire sections and starting over. I slowed my steps, careful not to make any noise. The conference room door was slightly open, just enough for me to see his screen clearly. The document title read, Compliance Assessment, Internal Security Review Request. He was drafting a formal report to trigger the HIPAA investigation, and my name appeared throughout the document. I could see specific references to procedural irregularities, potential data handling violations, and need for immediate audit review. I left the building without saying goodnight to anyone. Outside, Austin's downtown lights reflected off the glass towers around us, and the November air carried that sharp edge that means winter's coming. I walked slowly to my truck in the parking garage, the same question cycling through my mind. What did Jordan actually want from all this? Recognition? A promotion? Or just the satisfaction of watching a more experienced colleague fail? Whatever his motivation, I knew he was close to submitting that compliance report. If that was true, I needed to make sure the team recognition log was complete and backed up before anyone started asking questions about workplace culture and collaborative behavior. The next morning, I opened the team recognition log and added one final entry without any initials attached. Sometimes the absence of collaborative behavior creates its own data pattern. Then I saved multiple copies of the file and prepared to wait. The data would speak for itself when the time came. 2 weeks after I discovered Jordan's compliance report draft, those 3 auditors showed up at my desk. The investigation he'd triggered was now in full swing, and I knew exactly how this would play out. The formal interview process took place the following day. They brought me into conference room B, the one with recording equipment, and asked detailed questions about my data handling procedures, system access logs, and collaboration with team members. I answered everything directly, provided complete documentation, and offered to demonstrate any procedure they wanted to verify. The lead auditor was thorough but professional. After an hour of technical questions, he said they'd found something interesting during their system review and wanted my explanation. He opened his laptop and displayed the team recognition log database. The room grew quiet as he scrolled through weeks of entries documenting positive workplace interactions, collaborative problem-solving, and knowledge-sharing behaviors across our healthcare compliance teams. He asked what the tracking system represented and why I'd created it. I explained clearly that it was a personal productivity tool I'd developed to better understand what makes healthcare technology teams effective. It documented collaborative behaviors that improve patient data security and compliance outcomes, but usually go unrecognized in formal performance metrics. Nothing related to individual performance evaluation or surveillance, just systematic observation of positive professional interactions. He nodded, asked several questions about the data collection methodology, and asked to review the underlying code structure. I showed him everything transparently, the simple database queries, sample reports, even my personal notes about healthcare teamwork patterns. The auditors exchanged glances, then spent considerable time examining the frequency analysis reports. One of them pulled up a summary view that displayed collaboration metrics for all team members over the past 6 weeks. The data was unmistakable. Most employees showed consistent patterns of peer support, knowledge sharing, and collaborative problem solving. Names appeared regularly with specific examples of helping colleagues meet HIPAA deadlines, sharing compliance updates, or resolving technical issues that affect patient data security. But one name stood out for its complete absence from every positive interaction category. Jordan Brooks. 0 entries across all collaboration metrics. No knowledge sharing, no peer support, no evidence of the teamwork behaviors that make healthcare technology systems reliable. The lead auditor looked at me and asked directly if I'd intentionally excluded anyone from the tracking system. I said absolutely not. The data collection was based entirely on observable professional interactions that I witnessed or that were documented in our internal communication systems. If someone didn't appear in the positive collaboration logs, it meant their work style simply didn't generate the kind of cooperative behaviors the system was designed to capture. He stayed quiet for several long seconds, then made additional notes in his investigation file. They continued their review process for another 30 minutes, cross-referencing my team recognition log data with official HR records, project completion reports, and client satisfaction metrics. I could see them discovering correlations between collaborative behavior patterns and successful project outcomes. Finally, the lead auditor closed his documentation folder and said they'd compile their findings and present recommendations to senior management within 48 hours. Before leaving, he mentioned that the team recognition log represented an innovative approach to measuring workplace culture effectiveness that other departments might find valuable. I returned to my desk that afternoon, knowing the investigation would soon be over, but uncertain about what consequences Jordan's strategy might still produce. 2 days later, Patricia Walsh called me into her office. She had the audit team's final report open on her desk and wanted to discuss their findings and recommendations. I sat across from her, maintaining a calm expression. She explained that the investigation had found no HIPAA violations, no breaches of patient data protocols, and no evidence of any compliance failures in my work or system access patterns. However, she continued, the auditors had discovered something unexpected that warranted further discussion. The team recognition log had provided unique insights into team dynamics and collaborative effectiveness that could significantly improve how the company measures and develops workplace culture. Several department heads had already requested information about implementing similar recognition tracking systems for their healthcare compliance teams. She asked if I'd be interested in expanding the team recognition log company-wide as a pilot program for measuring collaborative behavior and professional development. The role would involve leading implementation across all departments and integrating the system with existing HR performance management tools. I accepted the opportunity. As our meeting concluded, Patricia mentioned that Jordan Brooks would be transitioning to our technical documentation department, where he could focus on individual project work without requiring extensive cross-team collaboration responsibilities. Her tone was matter-of-fact, like she was simply optimizing resource allocation for maximum efficiency. Walking back to my workstation, I passed Jordan packing his belongings methodically. He was transferring files to boxes, his expression focused entirely on the task. I considered saying something, but decided some situations resolve themselves without requiring additional commentary. The objective data had spoken more clearly than any conversation could. A company-wide announcement came from Patricia's office the following week. Lone Star Healthcare Analytics would officially launch a program called Collaborative Excellence Metrics, designed to identify and encourage the teamwork behaviors that improve patient data security and healthcare compliance outcomes. Marcus Henderson would serve as Program Implementation Director. Reading that message, I sat quietly at my desk for several minutes. not from personal satisfaction, but from recognition that something constructive had emerged from what began as a defensive response to workplace politics. Jordan still works here, 2 floors down in technical documentation. We occasionally cross paths in the elevator or parking areas. He nods politely when we make eye contact, neither avoiding interaction nor seeking extended conversation. Last month, I received an email with no signature. The subject line read, "Professional Reflection." The message was brief. Reviewed the collaborative excellence metrics first quarter results. Significant improvements in team productivity and client satisfaction. Maybe systematic recognition of positive behavior does create better outcomes than individual competition. Thank you for demonstrating what I hadn't understood about collaborative success. These days, I maintain the same routine of staying late occasionally to review the collaborative excellence dashboard. Hundreds of documented acts of professional cooperation now appear across all departments, creating measurable evidence that workplace culture directly affects healthcare compliance quality. Sometimes the most effective response to calculated workplace politics is patient documentation of what actually matters. Thanks for listening to the end.